Hello everyone and welcome to today's video. Now I'm just going to be continuing to show my Beatles UK singles collection, and today we're going to kick off with Ticket to Ride, and this is one of my personal favourite Beatles singles. So let's have a look at this first one. So this uses the sans serif font, and one interesting feature over here is that the 7XCE.18254 is in brackets, okay? So try and remember that because that's going to be important later. But yeah, anyway, this is it, Ticket to Ride, great Beatles single from the film Help. And that is backed with Yes It Is. Unfortunately, this copy has some label damage, as you can see on the right there. But again, an absolutely excellent B-side. This is a slightly better version of that. Slightly better condition copy. And there it is, just same as the last one, just without the label damage. Now here is another variation of Ticket to Ride. Now what's interesting here is that on the left hand side, not only has the whole Northern Songs NCB and the publishing 1965 credit moved around, but the 7XCE18254 is no longer in brackets, whereas it was on the previous variation there. So that's an interesting little feature. And here is another copy of Ticket to Ride, and I believe this one is just the same. Yep. One other thing to note actually about the change in the variation is that this is the earlier version that I showed you. The Ticket to Ride gets slightly bigger on the second variation, so it's going to be quite hard to compare them, but hopefully you'll be able to see that on the bottom one the Ticket to Ride is ever so slightly larger than it is on the top one. And the same goes for the Beatles band name. It's a lot closer to the Lennon-McCartney credit on the bottom one than it is on the top. Alright, so that's all the different variations I have of the Ticket to Ride single. We now move on to another fantastic Beatles song, and from the same album, and that is Help. So here's my first copy. Now what's interesting about this copy is that it doesn't really seem to use either sans serif or the Times New Roman font. It seems to be a unique font all of its own, which I've never really seen before. But it's quite a wide font, apart from on the sold in the UK, it seems quite narrow there. And on the B side of Help is the amazing Paul McCartney track, I'm Down. I really like the version he does of this at the Shea Stadium concert, if you've ever seen that, where he's singing it and then George Harrison and John Lennon are just absolutely laughing their backs off on the keyboards and the guitar. It's absolutely hilarious. But anyway, I would say this is probably one of my favourite Beatles B-sides. And I've got a couple of duplicate copies of that, so again we'll just skip over those. However, this next variation has some pretty substantial differences, so let's take a look. Now this one seems to have gone back to the sans serif font, so the Northern Songs and the P1965 are set out like this now. And interestingly, the 7XCE.18280 is in brackets here, whereas it wasn't on the previous issue. And the B-side there is just the same with the sans serif font. Now this next variation is going to be quite tricky to show, but I'll do my best. Now I'll just quickly refer back to the variation I've just shown you, this one here. Now if we look at the bottom section, now what will happen on the next variation is that the song title Help and the From Film of Same Name bits will just be a little bit tighter together, so it'll be a little bit closer together. Now one easy way that you can tell that this has occurred is if you look at the bracket just before Lennon on the Lennon-McCartney credit, that's underneath the O in From. However, that will be underneath the R in From on the next variation, so keep an eye out for that. And here is that next variation. Now, hopefully you'll be able to see that it is ever so slightly closer together, the words. And it's particularly noticeable, as you can see, because the bracket on Lennon there is now underneath the R in from rather than the O. So that's a tiny little difference, nothing really substantial. Just thought I'd point it out anyway. Now this is just a duplicate copy of that press. However, the next one I have to show you is very bizarre. So I'll show you it here. Now this is a third pressing of the single from 1969, and these ones are quite hard to get. Now, what's interesting is this one doesn't have the sold in the UK text on the centre of the label, which you would expect with it being in 1969, because that was the year that they stopped printing that on the albums and singles. But what is interesting is that, and I probably should have pointed this out earlier actually, so I apologise for this, the perimeter text begins with the Parlophone Company Limited. Now, they stopped doing that, I think, about early 1965. Now, I'm just going to refer you back to the previous press that I've shown you. Now this one has the Gramophone Company Limited, and so did every other version of Help that I've shown you, apart from the very first pressings, which had the Parlophone Company Limited. So you find the Parlophone Company Limited on the first pressings from 65 and the third pressings from 69. However, you can tell the difference because the first pressings obviously have the sold in the UK text, whereas the 69 pressings do not. Now, what's really peculiar is that EMI seem to have just used some leftover first pressing labels, and they've used them for this third pressing. However, they haven't stamped the middle with the sold in the UK text. So why they would do that, I really don't know, because it's weird that they've gone back to the Parlophone Company Limited. But that's what's happened, and the only other difference is that the third persons have a little ring in the centre there for some reason. But that's very strange, and that's not something you usually see with Beatles singles, so that's a bit of an oddity. And now we move on to the amazing double A side of We Can Work It Out and Day Tripper. So here's my first copy of that. Looking very similar to the Ticket to Ride and Help, in that these first editions have the 7XCE 18341 in brackets, and the perimeter text on these begins with the Parlophone Company Limited for the first press. And here's the other side for Day Tripper, which is very much the same. And here's a duplicate copy in a trashed Parlophone sleeve. One thing I will point out though on this variation is the position of the Northern Songs NCB, because that's going to change for the next variation I have to show. And here it is. Just focus on that. I'll take it out of this plastic cover. So here it is properly. Now the Northern Songs NCB has gotten a lot wider, so that's now on 2 lines rather than 3. And apart from that, it's very similar, except for the fact that it has the Gramophone Company Limited now on the perimeter text. So this is the second pressing of it. And if we look on the B side here, there's Day Tripper again, displaying all the same features. One other thing of interest actually is that if you look on the B side, this happens on the A side as well, but it's easy to see on the B side. Now, if we look on the B side, or the other side I should say, because this is a double A side, the 7 in 7XCE is beneath the N in songs. Now that's about to completely change position, and it will be under the O in songs on the next variation. And here is that second variation. Now, it's actually under the S as well as the O in songs, so it's moved a good centimetre and a bit to the left there. So that's now further underneath the Northern Songs NCB credit. Right, so we'll now move on to 1966 with Paperback Writer. And here is my first copy of that. And this is backed with Rain, which is a very, very interesting B-side. and the perimeter text on this copy begins with the Gramophone Company Limited, and this is the first single where the first pressings have the Gramophone Company Limited on. And as we're in 1966, it still has the sold in the UK text. That's not going anywhere for now. However, the 7XCE 18380 is not in brackets. Now, the weird thing about Paperback Writer is that there's only about 3 variations out there, or that I've heard of anyway, and I've only got one of them because another one is a rare kind of layout of the label, and another one is the 69 pressings, which are rare anyway. So, apart from a couple of duplicate copies, I don't actually have any of the Paperback Writers. So, we're going to be moving straight on to another classic double A side, and that is Yellow Submarine and Eleanor Rigby, both of which feature on the Revolver album and are fantastic songs. This label isn't in the best condition, unfortunately, but I'll show you it anyway. So, sans serif font, the 7XCE 18396 is in brackets, and this has the Gramophone Company Limited on the first press there, on the perimeter text. And on either side here is Eleanor Rigby. Now this copy is the same as the last one, however the next copy I have to show is very different. Now this is actually a solid centre copy of the single. Now it's a little bit more difficult to get a solid centre copy than a push out copy for this single, but it's not massively more difficult. But for any single prior to Yellow Submarine, if you get a solid centre, then you're extremely lucky because they are so hard to get. I once saw a solid centre copy of I Want to Hold Your Hand go for a couple of £100, so they are extremely rare. But Yellow Submarine and Eleanor Rigby, you can pick up solid centres a lot more easily. So anyway, as you can see, that's the major change with this. And also over here, the Northern Songs NCB has changed from the last press. Now I believe it's actually this layout of the Northern Songs NCB that's on the rare layout of Paperback Writer, which I mentioned a minute ago. So if you see a copy of Paperback Writer where the Northern Songs NCB looks like that, then I would recommend you pick it up. But anyway, another change between this and the last variation is that the 7XCE 18396 is no longer in brackets. So that's changed. And here's Eleanor Rigby on the other side. Again, displaying just the same features as the A side. And finally, this is just the same as the copy I've just shown you, solid centre. So that is just a duplicate. Right, so that is the end of this week's video. I hope you enjoyed it, and thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you all next time.